So, welcome to part 2 of the podcast on Between Lives, Past Life Regression, and the Evolution of Consciousness. So, I do recommend accessing part 1, which is available in a separate episode if you have not already done so, where we touch upon part 1 of the book, which is related to what is consciousness and does it survive physical death, and explores topics around regression, between lives, and near-death experiences. So in part 2, we will again introduce Andy and Reena and then touch upon part 2 of the book, which is related to how to create a new consciousness for a new earth. It demystifies the terminology, and it also explains a bit more about what this shift means for each of us. I really hope you enjoy part 2. So welcome everyone to another episode of Anita Das podcast, your invitation to explore topics related to holistic healing, therapies, spirituality, and much more. I'm so incredibly excited and honoured to welcome Andy Tomlinson and Reena Kumarasingham for today's episode. Andy and Reena are internationally renowned leading pioneers and experts in the field of regression, Between Lives Spiritual Regression, and exploration in the evolution of consciousness. So in this episode, you'll have the opportunity to hear from them directly about the launch of their new book, which is called Between Lives, Past Life Regression, Near-Death Experiences and Evolution of Consciousness. So by way of introduction, Andy is a renowned expert in past lives and soul experiences between lives. He began his career in 1996, originally as a psychologist and psychotherapist, and then moved into therapy with past lives. Andy is the founder of the Past Life Regression Academy, which he set up in 2002, and has trained over 500 therapists worldwide. And is also known for his books, Healing the Eternal Soul, Exploring the Eternal Soul, and Transforming the Eternal Soul. Since 2014, Reena has led new consciousness retreats to expand people's consciousness and prepare them for the new earth. She originally started as a psychologist and moved into regression therapy and Between Lives Spiritual Regression, and then an international trainer in this area for the Past Life Regression Academy. Reena is also the author of past life books, Shrouded Truth, The Magdalene Lineage, and Divine Consciousness. Reena had an NDE in 2020, which has inspired this book, co-authored with Andy, which we will discuss today. So on a personal note, I've had the personal privilege and honour to have trained with both Andy and Reena in regression therapy, Between Lives Spiritual Regression, which we may refer to as BLSR for short, and pioneering the New Consciousness Workshop. So it feels incredibly special for me to be able to discuss the publication of this new book. So welcome, Andy and Reena. I'm so incredibly excited to speak with you today.
Thank you so much for having us, Anita.
Yeah, welcome, Anita, and welcome to the audience. I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you so much. So first of all, it would be great if you could just briefly share your background, how you started this journey with regression, between lives, and exploration of consciousness.
For me, it was having completed 4 years of training as a psychotherapist, and I asked the question, what happens if someone wants a past life? And I was told, just treat it like a metaphor. So that was the level of training I got. And then shortly after being qualified, a lady came to me and said, I keep getting the thought of Venice going on in my head. I just can't get it out. I'm just wondering if I had a past life there. Could you do a past life regression? So I didn't really know what to do because I hadn't been trained, but I was trained in hypnosis. So I took her to a very deep level of trance, and she went spontaneously into a past life of being a madam responsible for prostitutes in Venice. And these were the lowest of the low at that time in society there. And I recorded it all. And when she came out, she hadn't remembered it. So I said, look, here's the recording. Go off and listen to it. And I bumped into her a couple of weeks later, and she said, how could you? So I beg your pardon. She said, how could you? I got all my friends round to listen to this tape, and I discovered what it was I was in as a madam in the past life. And it illustrates how the stories come through spontaneously with passing, and that was really that started me on the path.
Incredible. Thank you so much for sharing. Reena, did you want to touch upon anything for your background?
Yeah, so I grew up a Hindu in Malaysia. So for me, past lives was just a fact of life. And I then did a degree in psychology. But when I graduated, when I was about 21 years old, I felt I wasn't ready to serve in this capacity. So I just went on and I did an MBA, and I ended up working in the corporate environment in the media industry in Asia Pacific. And then one day I felt I was bored. About 10 years in, I felt I was really bored with doing public relations in the media industry. And my public relations mentor said to me, Reena, if you're bored doing public relations in the media industry, you're better off getting out of public relations. And so I thought, that's a good idea. Let me just dip my toe into this psychological healing area. And I did a weekend course in NLP, and I thought, yeah, I'm still interested. And then someone called Tomlinson started to advertise his program in Singapore, where he merged psychotherapeutic techniques with past lives. And so for me, that was like an incredible marriage, no pun intended. And so I attended the course, I paid for the course. Andy then decided to marry me and whisked me off from the tropical weather to English weather.
And didn't give a refund on the fee either.
Yeah. And yeah, so that's basically how I got started in the whole regression field.
That's beautiful. For me as well, it's been a lot of synchronicities just after, which we'll cross later, just coming across various people at various times just led me to this path. So thank you for sharing. And I think our viewers would be really interested to know how you came across this idea for this new book, how it was birthed.
So in 2020, I had a near-death experience because of COVID. It was the start of COVID. And my experience was quite profound for me. And one part of that experience, it was such a big experience for me. It was a turning point in my life. And one part of the experience was when I was pulled out of my body into this vast, expansive space. And I felt so expanded. I felt a peace that I've never felt before. I felt a freedom that I never felt before. And also, as I was pulled into this space, it was all anything that fed my ego, my egoic consciousness, fell away. All my anxieties, my fears. I had a few ambitions at that point. And I realized actually so much of it didn't matter in the real sense. In Hinduism, they talk about Maya, about how we live in a world of Maya, in illusion. And I felt that all these things that were feeding my ego were part of Maya, and it didn't really matter as much as I thought it initially had. And when I came back from my near-death experience, I felt that it took me about 2 months to get over COVID. And then it took me 3 months after that to really come to terms with the fact that I actually nearly died, but cerebrally, but then to actually integrate it and process it took some time for me. And in that time, I thought to myself, because I was teaching the Between Lives for the Past Life Regression Academy, so I was quite intimately aware of the process of the Between Lives, apart from the fact that I had it like I've had a session myself. I thought, it's so interesting how the process, the near-death experience process, is very similar to the Between Lives process. And so I said to Andy, I shared this with Andy, and then we thought, is this unique to my case? Or is it a universal thing that everyone experiences? Because if it is a universal thing that everyone experiences, then this is an amazing piece of evidence that consciousness survives the physical body in death, which is what a lot of people have been trying to do research on. The problem is people have been using a unidisciplinary approach, which is either near-death experience or mediumship or something. But we decided to look at near-death experience and between lives and put the two together. So that was one inspiration for the book. And then the second one was this huge expansive feeling. I shared that with Andy, and then we sat there and thought, is there a way for us to experience that expansion in the body? Like, we don't have to go through something as traumatic as a near death to actually experience it. And so that inspired the second part of the book, where we talk about how we can expand our consciousness in this body, especially in this new time of as the new consciousness is rising.
Thank you. That's really interesting. And I guess it leads me to the next question. In the preface of the book, it touches upon your NDE and the impact it had. Are you able to just briefly touch upon the transformation and the direction of your life since that pivotal event? How things have changed and in what way?
Yeah, I think there are a few main things that I brought back with me. The first thing is because I had experienced this huge expansion of consciousness. When I came back into my body, it was very interesting how that expansion of my consciousness still stayed with me. And I was picking up very subtle energies. I think a lot of people may call it becoming a little bit more psychic, but to me, it was picking up a lot more subtle energies. For example, I was looking out my balcony window as I was healing a few days or maybe a couple of weeks after my NDE. And I saw my neighbor was mowing his back lawn. And Andy came, and then I said, oh, our neighbor's having legal problems. And Andy asked me, how do you know that? I said, I just do. The grass is green, the sky is blue, neighbor's having legal problems. And 2 weeks later, Andy bumped into him in the garden, and he shared that he was having legal problems with Andy. And so it's interesting because my sensitivity to subtle energies have become a lot more sharp. But I think for me, the main things are about this thing about how so many things don't matter. And I realized that our greatest currency, my greatest currency in our lifetime, our energy and our time, and how we spend our energy and time really enables us to live the sort of life we want to live, and how we normally fold ourselves into a pretzel to make everyone else happy or to fulfill everyone else's agenda. But when I was going through my near-death experience, number one, it was unexpected. Number two, nobody knew. Not even Andy knew. And I was thinking to myself as I was getting pulled, oh my gosh, this big thing is happening and I haven't told anyone. And then I thought, even after that, very few people's lives would actually be impacted if I passed away. You know what I mean? And then I thought, why am I folding myself up into a pretzel just to make other people happy? I have to honor and value how I use my time and my energy. And I'm actually quite particular and very strict about that. And so even if, these people who, if they come towards me and if any of them are in any way, shape or form disrespectful, I actually remove myself from their presence, because that's not a good use of my time and energy. And I'm focusing on fulfilling like a dream that I have. And it doesn't matter what society or other people say about the dream. This is my dream, and I'm going to use my time and energy to pursue that dream. And hopefully it makes some money as I move forward. So I think I've become a lot more picky about how I use my time and energy. And I think that's the biggest takeaway that I've gone through.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So it sounds like you've become more intentional about where you direct or focus your energy and how to create or manifest your desired kind of reality, and being in alignment with your authentic self, who you are, and living your passion. Would that be a fair?
That's exactly right. And also knowing my worth. Knowing my worth enough that if someone there doesn't know my worth, I will just remove myself from that presence. And does that make sense?
Yeah, so having those kind of boundaries and understanding where it fits in with your energy. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm actually going to move on now to part 2 of the book. And now this focuses on how to create a new consciousness for a new earth. And it's a guide to expanding this consciousness, developing the wisdom for this kind of new era, what it means to live in the new consciousness, create this new earth. So for those who, again, might not be familiar with all this terminology, maybe are you able to, at a high level, maybe briefly explain what's meant by moving to this new kind of golden age of Aquarius? They may have heard of ascension, 5D, all these different terms, and how this impacts the earth and humanity and ourselves.
Okay. So I'm just going to compare two different types of astrology. It's going to be the Western astrology and the Vedic astrology. And it's very interesting how they're both simultaneously matching with the sort of information that you're getting from two different parts of astrology. So with Western astrology, every 2,200 years, the Earth goes through something called the precessional rotation. A precessional rotation means that as we are orbiting around the Earth or the universe or the sun, we are predominantly looking at one set of zodiac constellation. And then every 2,200 years, we shift and we look at another set of zodiac constellation. And so this is what we call moving through a new age. Yes, each zodiac constellation is a new age. So for example, and every time there is a shift in age, there is a shift in consciousness. For example, when we move through the age of Taurus to the age of Aries, nearly 6,000 years ago, Moses came along. And Moses shifted the consciousness from a multi-god system to a single god system. And then when we move from the age of Aries to the age of Pisces, so this was 2,000 years ago, so Moses was 4,000 years ago. So when we move from the age of Aries to Pisces 2,000 years ago, Jesus came along and he moved consciousness from a very harsh, judgmental God to one of a more loving God. Now we are moving from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius. And so there's going to be another shift in consciousness as well. But not only that, in Western astrology, we're not just moving 2,200 years, we are starting an entire rotation, a whole new precessional rotation that occurs only once every 26,000 years. So then if we move to the Vedic astrology, it's so interesting because even if you look at the timelines, it matches the Western astrology. And what they're saying is we are right now at Kali Yuga, which is the dark age. And we are moving out of Kali Yuga to a different time age. And the thing with Vedic astrology is we move through the golden age, the silver age, the iron age, and dark age, and then we go up again. The cycle of Vedic astrology. And that's just part of the cycle of consciousness that we all go through. And so within Vedic astrology, the experts are all having a little bit of a bicker because some experts are saying we're moving from the dark age, from Kali Yuga straight into the golden age. And some say that we're moving out of Kali Yuga straight to the iron age, and then back to silver age, and then back to the golden age. So that's what they are arguing about. But the one thing that they can all agree on is that we are shifting our consciousness. We're actually raising it and we're going through something better. A lot of people ask me, why is it that we go down in terms of consciousness, like from the golden age to the dark ages? And it's because, I'll just give you an example, because I'm from Malaysia and I love Malaysian food. If I stayed in Malaysia, I wouldn't learn how to cook Malaysian food because it's so readily available and it's so cheap. Whereas here in England, in this beautiful countryside, I don't have access to Malaysian food and I have to learn to cook. So when you don't have something, your propensity to learn and grow and evolve expands. So it's within the dark age that we can expand our consciousness and expand our soul consciousness more than we can do if we're in the golden age. If you are just sitting in the lap of love and peace and joy the whole time, there's very little to learn and grow and evolve from a soul perspective. And also now, as we're transiting through this time, we get to learn even more because our whole consciousness is shifting. And so what's happening to the earth during this time is we are currently being bombarded by so much high vibration energy. And because we are all, come down to the basic of it, we're just vibrating energy that looks like string. The more energy that's coming down, the more our energy is being agitated. So you can see, so if you hold any emotional energy within you, that's going to be agitated. So if you have any anger or rage, that's going to come out more. If you hold more peace and love, that's going to come out more. So it's almost like this carpet with the earth. What it's doing is it's dusting a carpet, you're agitating, and more dust comes out. And then you're looking underneath and you're seeing all sorts of hidden things that you don't want to. And this is an opportunity for us to clear out all these hidden things. And hopefully, when the agitation settles down to the new vibration, then the carpet is nice and clean. So that's basically what's happening now at this time, which is why we see enhanced polarity. This is why we get a lot more emotional outbursts out there. There's a lot more fear, a lot more anger. And this isn't just in the UK or the US. This is happening worldwide, geopolitically, economically, all these strange COVID things. The things are just coming up to the surface. Information is just coming up to the surface because the carpet is just being dusted, as it were. And so that's what's happening now. And ascension is basically us shifting our vibration from this sort of vibration to a higher vibration. And that is what we call ascension, because when we shift to a different vibration, we're going to access more subtle energies. These are things that a lot of people say your psychic abilities expand. For me, it's just access to subtle. You don't have to be special to access subtle. You don't have to have a special gift. You just have to be more aware of the subtle energies. That's why I don't tend to use the word psychic, and I use like a more general term, accessing subtle energies. So that's basically what ascension is. 5D is, a lot of people say we are currently living in a three-dimensional world because of the sort of what we can perceive with our eyes, and our senses are very gross, like hard. But as we move into something where we can access more subtle energies, that's like the 5D world. So it's not just things that we can, that's loud, it's getting to know more of the subtle energies. What's the other term? It's the golden age.
Oh, yes, golden age of Earth, which we're going to come on to.
Yes. So golden age is just borrowing it from the Vedic astrology, where we're moving. This is where we're saying there's an argument right now whether we're moving from the Kali Yuga, the dark age, to the Satya Yuga, which is the golden age, or we're moving from Kali Yuga to the Iron Age. Whatever it is, whichever age we're going to, it's going to feel golden when it's been so dark for so long.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the Satya means truth. So it's moving to the age of truth. And there's so many kind of different interpretations of whether it's a kind of a period of 10,000 years of golden age before the Satya Yuga, or if we go straight into it. But as you said, it's obviously pertinent that there's a shift in consciousness. And thank you for all the wonderful examples that you've given. For me personally, I always like to think of a glass of water which has maybe some sediment or mud at the bottom, and then you're just pouring more water into the glass, and that sediment or mud is just rising and it becomes murky water. So everything's coming up to the surface. But as you pour more water, it eventually becomes clear, pristine water, which is where we're transitioning to. So I guess what we're saying, there can be more chaos for kind of foundations to be embedded. So thank you for so much for sharing that with so much clarity. So the book has many practical exercises to assist with transition, such as managing lifestyle changes, old patterns, relationship issues, and there's a whole chapter dedicated on energy management and boundaries. So it has many wonderful examples of how we can expand our consciousness and shift to this new consciousness that we've been talking about. So that's all in the book. Would you say there's any kind of key indicators for people to know when they've shifted, or any signs to show that they're starting to shift? I know we talk in the book about how to shift, but it may be.
Yeah, I think it's just listen to your body and the life that you're living. For example, if you start to have ill health of the body, it could be an indicator that there's things that you need to change. It could be the sorts of foods you eat, or it could be an emotional issue that hasn't been cleared, because we do hold emotions in the body. If people are finding themselves bursting out with a particular emotion, for example, if there's various politicians that bring up emotions. For example, we were doing a workshop and one of the participants was from the United States, and we mentioned the word Trump, and he immediately was pouring out venom.
Okay.
And it was like, it's almost like when someone's got a phobia and they see a spider, and then the fear comes up. It's not the spider that's the problem. It's the person owning the emotion that's coming up and dealing with it. And as Reena was saying before, emotions are being amplified by these new energies that are coming in. So in his case, that particular gentleman in America was triggering something inside that person for him to go in and look at and to clear, which he did. And then that person's name came up, Trump's name came up, and without the emotions that are in there. It would be listen to your body, listen to your lifestyle, and there's a message there.
And I think there's also going to be, when you have a shift in vibration, you will no longer be affected by the vibration of the 3D world. For example, you won't be so affected by some of the news information that you're getting. It doesn't matter who the world leaders are. It just won't matter. It won't matter what some of the policies are. Some of the cultural conditioning, if you can break through some of these cultural conditionings or these belief systems, a lot of things just won't matter anymore. The other thing that could happen as well as you're shifting vibration is that you may or may not resonate with people, some certain people anymore within your life. And you will just feel really uncomfortable. There is no friction, no nothing. It's just that one person's vibrating like this and another person's vibrating like that. There's just an incompatibility. And so you will see either these people who don't resonate with you either dropping out of your life, and you will find more people that you can merge with in a much more peaceful and harmonious way as well. So these are some of the things to, and then food, what you thought you could handle before, like perhaps McDonald's being your favorite food, suddenly turns you off and your body just rejects that food. Again, because there's a vibrational dissonance with that. And so I think if we focus more on what, as Andy says, just honor what the body is saying and what your emotions are saying, that's when you will know that you are starting to go up the shift.
Okay, that's really useful. If this is resonating with people, there's so much more information in the book on actual practical exercises to release anything that needs to be released, or just if there's changes in relationships or you're feeling kind of triggers in emotion or heightened emotions. There's all kind of ways to manage this. So there is reference to transition from ego to soul consciousness. Are you able to maybe touch upon the benefit from transitioning from ego to soul consciousness?
I think at the end of the day, the ego is the very loud, gross consciousness that we hold, that we feel like we need to survive in this world. And the soul consciousness is the very soft, subtle consciousness that is our authentic being, as it were. And we develop an ego as almost like a way to survive this world, because we're constantly bombarded by so much noise. It's almost what we have to do for work, or what ambitions you have to hit, or what sort of house you have, or it's just, this is, a lot of it is quite egoic. But at the end of the day, the ego is Maya. It's just illusion. And a lot of the world that we live in is also Maya and illusion. And if we drop the ego, and if we can connect to the subtle whispering of the soul consciousness, that will get us completely connect to our soul mission, our soul path, and it will move us forward, because we are no longer fighting with our intrinsic being. Because sometimes the ego can fight with intrinsic being. Just an example, I don't know if you can relate to this, but in my culture in Malaysia, I was told I needed to either be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, which I'm not technical, or an accountant. And people kept telling me, Reena, be a lawyer. But I wanted to be a psychologist. I wanted to go down this path. So my soul was calling me to go down this path, because clearly towards the end of my life, not end of my life, this part of my life, I was going to go down this path. However, had I accepted the noise, the cultural noise from the outside, and if I had filled my head with the ego, I would have gone down the path of being a lawyer. And I might have been miserable because I wasn't fulfilled going down the path of my soul calling, as it were. And so this is why we say in the book, connect to your soul consciousness, because that will connect you to your authentic vibration that will then move you through this transition. And we need as much authenticity as we can get as we are creating this new vibrational consciousness in the world.
Absolutely. So it's a lot related to how we identify ourselves, whether it's with kind of labels or the personality, ego self, individuated self, or our broader unified self. Sorry, Andy, I think you were going to mention something there.
Yeah, I was just going to say one of the other signs of an ego is being right or wrong on a particular subject. And Reena was mentioning before the duality, where people are taking extremes about positions, whether it's politics, world events, net zero, or things of this nature. That's when the ego is getting involved, where when the ego isn't involved, the person has got an open mind, they look at information, and they make critical thinking or intuitive insights to form their own opinions about things. But one of the big things about working through ego is, because it's something I've worked or am working through, if I said I'd work through it, that would probably indicate I'm still working on it, is you become blind to it. You don't know you've got an ego problem. And sometimes you either need to have an experience the sort that Reena was talking about, where she was able to move out of ego to be able to recognize ego, or to have someone that can say to you, this is ego. When you stop and think and reflect on it, and then prepare to start bringing about a change. Because ego was formed basically when we're separated from source. And because there was this cutoff, ego was formed to think we have to survive, we have to look after ourselves. Whereas if we were permanently connected to source, then ego really would never foster. So it serves a purpose, but working through it and mastering it is a challenge. And we offer quite a few tips in the book about how to do that.
Yeah, perfect. And can you explain more about what's meant by the establishment of the new earth, how it affects our consciousness, and what living in the new consciousness would look like? I know it's touched upon in the book and just at a very high level. I know there's examples as well in the book about how students have maybe integrated or shifted into the new consciousness from attending your workshops, but I don't know if you wish to examples there. Sorry.
Yeah, what we do, because we run our Pioneering the New Consciousness workshops, we run part 1 and then part 2 for those who've attended part 1 to get more information. And what we do is we do simulate what it's like living in the new consciousness. And what it really is, and I think the main focus of it is really examining the belief systems we hold, the conditionings that we hold, because at the end of the day, if you imagine the earth and there's a current grid of consciousness on the earth, around the earth, and the grid of consciousness is made up of every emotion, mental thought that we have, that we've spat out into the world. Because if we look at basic physics, energy can be created, but it cannot be destroyed. Yeah. So and emotions and thoughts and everything, that's all energy, right? All this vibrating string. So if you spit it out, where does it go? It doesn't disappear. It goes and it forms what's known as the grid of consciousness. And the more the same belief systems and the same conditionings keep coming in, it strengthens the current grid of consciousness, the 3D grid of consciousness. The problem is the current grid of consciousness cannot ascend or cannot evolve into the new consciousness because it's still holding on to the old vibrations. And so what we need to do, which is what the polarity is doing in the world, is it has to squish that current grid of consciousness so that the earth is free of that old grid of consciousness, and then we can ascend and start forming new thoughts that is in line with the new resonance of the new earth. So what do we see that looks like right now? We just see, so when we simulate it, it's people who are triggered, who take ownership of their own triggers and who do something emotionally about it. It's not, oh, I'm offended by you, I'm offended by you, I'm offended by you, and I don't do anything about it because it's all your problem because you've offended me. It's moving away from the victim mentality to being more empowered about what we can do with ourselves. It's also what we hope is to start having a deeper connection with nature. Because at the end of the day, we are of the earth. We are not of technology, as it were. We are natural beings. And if we have a deeper connection with the earth and the vibration of the earth, be it animals and plants, that hold the purest resonance of what the earth offers, more pure than what humans can hold. This is something that we're moving more towards. So it's moving away from maybe consuming ultra-processed foods or foods grown in laboratories and actually eating more natural foods, which in that sense we can absorb the newer vibrations more. It's also what we also do in the course is develop people's way of sensing the more subtle energies. Because as you sense the more subtle energies, the loudness of the world just doesn't matter anymore. We're focusing on subtle. And when we focus on the subtle, we help with the ascension process because everyone's vibrating higher.
Could I illustrate it with a metaphor?
Yeah.
It's almost like the old grid of consciousness is being in a valley where there's factories that are churning out smoke and we're coughing and spluttering in this world. And the new consciousness is the top of a mountain where all the air is pure and clean. And we somehow have to get out from this coughing, spluttering valley up to the top of the mountain. But in between the two is a fog. And what we do is we take people out of the spluttering world, take them on top of the mountain, let them breathe the air so they've got a vision where they can go to and what they can do. So when they come back into the spluttering, dense, foggy valley, they can navigate through that fog just a little easier. And also our book is a little bit of a guideline of helping people through that fog to discover an entirely different way of being out of that old, spluttering, dirty, decaying valley that we're in at the moment.
I absolutely love your metaphors and descriptions. They're very valuable and a great way to understand where we are and the density of going from one level to another. And yeah, Thank you so much for sharing. So the book ends with how to create the new earth with incredibly useful exercises on manifestation, maintaining high frequency. And there's also some channeled messages from several collectives you refer to as the Council of Beings of Light, Galactic Beings of Light, Creators of Oneness, Elders, and Divine Mother. I think our viewers might be interested to know whether you could maybe touch upon how you initially connected with these beings and maybe a bit about their roles and whether maybe others can connect with them through attending your workshops.
I think for me, it was interesting because although I grew up a Hindu, somewhere midpoint, I became an atheist. And before I actually started to walk the spiritual path, I was working in, like I said, in the media industry in Asia Pacific. And I did a trip. I like to travel. So I went to Nepal. And Nepal's so beautiful. And I was sitting in a bus tour. We were driving through these amazing mountains in Nepal. And suddenly I realized, I was just paying attention to the mountains. Suddenly I realized my head was, and then I started to pay attention to the chat. And then I asked someone, I said, "Who are you?" And she said, "Oh, I'm the Divine Mother." And I'm sitting there going, I think I've got childhood wounding. So this is a psychological thing. I'm trying to make up for my childhood wounding. So I've got a mother figure in my head. Okay, it is what it is. And then a couple of years later, I did something. I started the spiritual journey and I attended a workshop called Activating Your Light Body by Orin and Darwin, Sanaya and Dwayne. Anyway,
Okay.
yeah. And it was in Singapore. And so it was a series of meditations where they're activating your different chakras or whatever through sound and your light body. And then the graduation of this course was to meet your spirit guide. So I was like terribly excited. I was like, yeah, I'm going to meet my spirit guide. And so at first I remember like Buddha came in and I was like, "Oh, are you my spirit guide?" He goes, "No." And then there was some Pegasus came in and I was like, "Are you my spirit guide?" I said, "No." And then there was this like yogi type, chappy rishi type with his veshti and everything. And I'm like, "Are you my spirit guide?" He goes, "No." And then there was this beautiful energy, green and red. And I'm like, where's my spirit guide? And then the same voice said, "Yes, I'm your spirit guide. I'm the Divine Mother." And then I didn't think much of it because I thought, clearly wounding still there. I need a mother figure. And then this is the beginner spiritual path of Reena. Then I was with my friend who did the Jinshin, who started my whole awakening process, Julie. And we were with a group of friends, of some of her friends. And they were sharing who their spirit guides were, like the Japanese warrior and the Native American Indian something. So someone asked me, like, "Who's your spirit guide?" And I said, "Oh, she's an energy called the Divine Mother." And then they were like, "Oh, we all connect to the Divine Mother. I work with the Divine Mother this way, and I work with the Divine Mother that way." And I was sitting there feeling a bit sulky because I'm sitting there going, "I don't work with your Native American Indian and I don't work with your Japanese warrior. Like, why is everyone working with my spirit guide?" So what's going on? I didn't understand. And then Julie told me who the Divine Mother is because I complained to her later. And she actually told me who the Divine Mother was. And I was like, okay, so I understand this now. But to me, she's always been my guide. Like, she's my version of the Japanese warrior. The Divine Mother's been with me for a long time. And then at one point, we were sent on an assignment to not Mount Shasta, to Sedona by the Divine Mother. And so we were driving in the desert in Sedona. Oh, Andy was, anyway, not me. And I was looking up at the sky and I saw a face in the sky, like in the clouds. And I said to Andy, "Oh, there's a face in the sky." And luckily, I'm with a man who didn't think I was cuckoo bird when I said this. And this face said, "We are going to give you a new course in due time. Wait for it." And I communicated that with Andy. And so we said, "Okay, let's wait for it." And I think it was about 4 days later, we were in Las Vegas of all places. And suddenly I started to channel the face, and they are the Council of Beings of Light. And initially they didn't want to be named because they said if you name a being, it will trigger ego. But we said we have to address you in some way. So can you please just give us a name, any name, it doesn't matter, that we can use. And they said, all right, just call us the Council of Beings of Light. And we said, okay, fine. And the council is part of a group of beings who are actually helping with the shift of the earth into the new vibrations. So they've been through it before, and so they're just helping earth shift. And so they're the ones who channeled the Pioneering New Consciousness syllabus to us. And we follow their way of working and teachings with the retreats that we run. The Galactic Being of Light is part of the Council of Being of Light. But I think there's no hierarchy, but I think he has more of a say, no matter he or she. And so the galactic being very rarely comes, but when the galactic being comes, like it's real, you know what I mean? There's an impact, like something is going to happen when the galactic being of light comes through the channeling. Okay. And elders, I will pass that off to Andy because that has no connection with me.
That's a group of beings who work with regression therapy, and they work closely with me in my creation of the Past Life Regression Academy. They work with all the training events and help give insights and help with that. They probably work in others who are doing past life regression as well. I don't know which groups there are, but the beings of light tend to specialize in certain areas. For example, Reena's mentioned spirit guides, and their focus is to help particular souls work through a life plan. So they know what it is before souls incarnate, and then they oversee it all and help in the review of it. So they've all got different spiritual jobs, and it's not that any one of them is more important than others. It's just a different focus. And just the last group that you mentioned.
And the Creators of Oneness was the other one, I think.
Yeah. They're another group who are really focused much more on helping create the new consciousness.
Yeah.
And when people have got to the right level of vibration and they're actively starting to create something new, then these beings will work cooperatively with them, give them insight, help, guidance.
And in the course, we do connect. We don't do it. The beings, the council, because the Council of Beings of Light are the ones who tap people to come to the retreats. And so there is, I don't know if it's an initiation, but it's almost like a connection with the council that each of our attendees come, because they're like new consciousness seeds around the world.
Yeah. And we quite often get people coming on the retreats not knowing quite what to expect, but they just know that they have to be there.
Yeah.
And it's because it's quite hard to use words around something you've no experience with.
We just ran one last week, and all of them said they came in almost like they were dragged in. They didn't know that they wanted it, or they didn't know what they were going to get from it, and they were thinking about it, but there was just a pull for the
and I've attended both 1 and 2 of your workshops and definitely felt that pull, and they're held in such beautiful locations. You have Mount Shasta. It came to kind of Glastonbury. The heart chakra is such a beautiful high vibrational area that you host the retreats in.
Thank you.
Yeah, there is more information on the website, and I will include the links. Obviously, you've mentioned that there's a wealth of support from different collectives to guide us through this process. Have you experienced any kind of challenges in transitioning to this new consciousness, and how did you overcome those?
I think, do you know what really holds us into the old consciousness is a collective way of being in the old way. And normally it's people who hold you down, like attachments that hold you down. So whether it's attachments to your family and not wanting to annoy, anger them, perhaps as you're transitioning, it could be an attachment to a work because of the fear of loss of security and income. That will hold you, keep us in the old. It's maybe even you sound a bit like a loony bird, and your current group of friends suddenly go, what's wrong with you? So it's that whole old wounding of persecution, as they did so many years ago, so many times, like, for example, the Nietzsche's era. So one of the ways we do it, some of the ways we overcome it, is we live in a very beautiful part of the world where it's not secluded, it's not isolated, but it's very much in nature. What I like to use the example is in India, as the rishis are shifting their vibration, they go off into the Himalayan mountains and they live by themselves and they just focus on their ascension process, because there is not as much noise, not as much distractions, and it's a huge form of detachment when they leave all their worldly goods behind, their people behind, and they move on. And I think that is the biggest way to actually shift into the new consciousness, is detachment from all the things that are holding you in the valley, whether it's people, things, jobs, belief systems, conditioning. And these are the challenging things that we have to unweave from ourselves to then move into the new consciousness. And it takes courage. It takes a lot of courage.
Absolutely, yeah. Did you want to add anything, Andy? Or
I was just going to say, the compass that takes you there is within us. It's called our intuition, our insights. And often our ego is playing on in our head and our thoughts, and it's learning to discriminate between the two. And a lot of people do exercise like meditation, walks in nature, changing of jobs, a lot of things Reena's been talking about. But ultimately, we've all got a different path, and it's learning what that path is, wherever it takes us, and that will lead us out of the valley that I was talking about before, up to the peak, and being in a completely different sort of life and existence.
And how and when do you see the new earth becoming manifest, and how do you see this current landscape evolving over time?
I think how and when would depend on the collective humanity as a whole, because we've been told by our guides that the shift of the new into the new consciousness is imperative. Plants and animals that live off the earth are more in tune with the vibrational shift of the earth than people, because people are hanging on to the grid of consciousness more than the actual natural vibrations of the earth. And at the end of the day, the shift is going to happen, and whether people join or not is not as important, is what we've been told. And there have been many times that floods have come, as it were, but this is just another opportunity for us to evolve. And we need to determine the evolution of our consciousness is dependent on us, nobody else. No. So it's not going to be an external force that's going to make us evolve. We've got to do it ourselves. We've got to do the hard work. We've got to make those hard choices to evolve or not to evolve. That's all dependent on us.
So just to illustrate it, when we decided to go on this shift, then we manifested the house that we're in now, which is in the country, a quiet location where, and we do a lot of our work from home, internet, or writing books, or whatever. It's like we've created our own
life raft.
Yeah, our own energetic life raft. And the more people who do that, you can join up with other people that are doing the life raft, and eventually you'll get communities. So you don't have to wait for other people to do it. You don't have to wait for politicians so they say, we'll fix your problems. You do it yourself. You do it by manifesting and creating around your own resources, your own skills. And that's how it's going to be. It's going to be a change from below rather than a change from above, from some sort of savior coming along and saying, this is it, I'm going to save the world. We have that within us, and it's finding it, tuning into it, listening to it, and then changing things in our life to harmonize with it.
Okay, no, thank you. So it sounds like it's about aligning with our inner selves, our divine selves, but also the changes coming from the grassroots level and at the community level, and like the grid or the net you mentioned for that kind of spreading across the earth over time. So that's really useful. And are you able just to briefly just touch upon, to share a bit more about the workshops, the courses you offer, or any further projects or books in the pipeline that you might wish to share? I know you've touched a bit upon the pioneering new consciousness. Is there anything else that you want to mention?
If people are interested in developing skills as a therapist, then we have courses in regression therapy and past life regression. And with Between Lives Spiritual Regression, we have Reena produced a home study course so people can do it without necessarily a full 5 or 6 days to go through and do the workshop.
You can do it in their own time.
Yeah, it's also produced some home study workshops on and different sorts, and then there's the retreats that we've just been talking about, the pioneering new consciousness retreats that we do once a year in the summer months. So there's, and it's together with the book. So these are some of the tools that we've produced.
Right now, our retreats are run predominantly in the UK, in Glastonbury. So they are 1 week retreats where, again, we're simulating how to live in a new consciousness and teaching people how to shift vibrationally as well, so that they can go back and just keep raising their vibrations in line with the shift of the earth. So we've got Pioneering New Consciousness 1 and Pioneering New Consciousness 2. Again, a lot of people just feel the call to come to it. And it's something that we have to ask the council permission for. Is this person, can they come? And so that's why we say that the council chooses the people to come through. And Pioneering New Consciousness 2 is just like an extension of 1. It's more advanced levels than Pioneering New Consciousness 1. That's basically what we do with the retreat.
But I think we've got an awful lot of things on our hands just helping this and spreading it. The people that are coming to the workshops are pioneers in their own way, different parts of the world, bringing about change, and we're keeping a network and thread them together. So it's not like we're going to be suddenly, what do we do next? We're at home, oh my goodness. We've got nothing to do. We just flow with the energy of what's happening and enjoy. Every day is a joy, it's a pleasure, and we're in gratitude for being able to be involved in this amazing transition that's occurred.
And I just want to say something, that you don't need to be a therapist to come to our retreats. Like, we've had bankers and advertising executives have come to our retreats. We've had people who work in the corporate world who come to the retreats, because at the end of the day, the shift is affecting everyone, not just spiritual people, not just therapists. Every single soul on this earth is going through the shift. And so those who hear the call, they come and then they start vibrating with the new vibration in their workspace, as it were. So it's almost like seeding the new vibrations into the grid.
Yeah. So people can come from any background. I myself have been in both corporate and holistic healing and therapy as well. And it's really, if you feel that kind of intuitive nudge or that pull, where you have that inner knowing that, yeah, I need to attend. So for anyone who would like to find out more, I will be including websites and for information on how to join, and information on the courses about regression therapy, Between Lives Spiritual Regression, and the Pioneering New Consciousness workshops.
Yeah, and this is our book.
That's the book. Oh, thank you so much for sharing. Yeah. And so, Andy and Reena, what would be your key message to leave our viewers with today? What would be the key message you would like for them to consider?
I think my key message for your viewers would be, thank you to Anita for having us on. That's because it's so wonderful to be part of your podcast and to talk more about the book and giving an opportunity to talk about our work, and we really appreciate that. But it is also to start really focusing intentionally where you want to spend your time and your energy. There's nothing else that I can leave everyone with. It's that, because at the end of the day, you are here. Life is here. Life is the present. It's not the past, and it's not the future. It's the present. If we can live our lives more intentionally, following our soul calling, I think that is one of the biggest reasons for being. And if that's like the biggest lesson or message I can leave with anybody, then I'm happy.
I would just add that we all have within us everything that it takes to work through any problem, any difficult situation. It's almost like we're in a prison cell in the sorts of lives often a lot of us are in, high stress, difficulties. But the door's open. It's not locked. It's just that we're holding ourselves in this prison, and all we have to do is to walk through the door and we can discover something entirely new. But we have to take that step, and we don't need anyone else other than what's actually inside us. And in fact, in our book, all we're doing is we're helping people to connect with that magical part within that guides them and takes them on this journey of growth and spiritual awareness.
Thank you so much. And as Andy and Reena have mentioned, there's so much. You have inner resources. There is a level of the choice is with you, with the free will, but there is a plethora of support, guidance through the book, through the workshops, to navigate this journey of being in the present moment and having these choices. And I would like to express so much gratitude for Andy and Reena for all that they do and for everything that they host. I personally could carry on talking for days. I love conversing in this, so it's wonderful for me to discuss this. Thank you so much again. And the book, I will also just share, I do have a copy of the book here as well.
Oh, wow. You've got a bigger copy than ours. I don't know. So it's have the king size version.
Yeah, so it's available on Amazon and it's also on Audible, so available now. And again, so just to finish, again, I'd just like to thank both Andy and Reena for their insightful discussions and their comments, and just to go through the book in more detail. So if you did like this content, please feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channels. So at Past Life Regression Training, at Reena Kumarasingham Author, at Anita Das Therapy. You may also wish to follow us, like us, or across our social media, which is accessible from our website. So these are regressionacademy.com, reenakumarasingham.com, and anitadas.co.uk. Thank you so much for joining us for Anita Das Podcast for another insightful episode. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.